We want to introduce our speaker now because we go on air and we want Jamaica to hear. Our speaker is Mr. Brian Camenker. I hope I pronounce it properly. You know, we always have problems pronouncing people from other places' name. But he'll correct that. He is from Massachusetts, the Boston area. And he has been working with a group called MassResistance for about approximately 18 years. It's a group that consists of Catholics, Protestants, other evangelicals. And their objective is to protect children from the aggressive, what we call the sexual rights agenda. And he works not only with people in the United States, but people in places as far as Australia in seeking to keep children safe from this aggressive sexual rights agenda, which is seeking to silence the church and take away our freedom of speech, freedom of our conscience, parental rights, and so. And he himself is a Jew. He is a Jew, he is married, and he has 2 children. He looks on the work that he does as a sort of civil rights movement, protecting people from others who are seeking to impose things on them. So would you please welcome Mr. Brian Camenker. He came all the way from the United States, and we did not pay for him to come. We asked him to come. He set about getting resources to come, so we want to thank him for doing that. Brian, can you work with this?
Thank you very much, Dr. West. It's a great honor for me to be here. Jamaica is really a wonderful country. I love it. As Dr. West said, I'm president of the pro-family group MassResistance based in Massachusetts, and I've been asked to come and talk about what our state and the United States has gone through. Again, our website is www.massresistance.org. Here in Jamaica, you are facing pressure by special interests to repeal the Buggery Law, which is being pushed hard both in the courts and at your Prime Minister. I am here to warn you that it will have terrible consequences. A law that contradicts God's law is the beginning of a slippery slope that you cannot imagine. Here is what we saw and experienced. First, right after homosexual sex was legalized came the public gay pride parades. Parading down the streets of cities are all kinds of bizarre, perverse activities, vulgar and profane signs, cross-dressers, sadomasochism, people mocking the church, and much more. Next came the non-discrimination laws, which have actually spread around the country. If it's legal, they argue, then every business must fully accept it or face punishment. For example, a bed and breakfast called the Wildflower, which is run by Catholics, refused to hold a lesbian event. I talked to the owners myself about it, but the state said they had no choice. So they were sued and forced to pay $30,000 or $3 million in Jamaican dollars for refusing to do a lesbian event. Then, as part of the non-discrimination, homosexual adoption of children comes. In Massachusetts, the Catholic Charities Organization was told that they must give children to homosexual couples or close down. They were forced to close down. It came to a point where the state adoption agencies were enthusiastically giving children to homosexual couples. In 2006, the state of Massachusetts named 2 men as Adoptive Parents of the Year. And then there's schools. Schools started having day-long events celebrating homosexuality, telling children it's normal and that their parents' religious beliefs are wrong. This indoctrination even goes into the elementary schools. In 2005, David Parker, a parent in Lexington, Massachusetts, was outraged that his son in kindergarten was being taught about homosexual relationships. When he met with school officials to demand that he be able to exclude his son from this, the school called the police and had Mr. Parker put in jail overnight. I watched it myself. I was there. And he was also banned from coming back to the school. Later at that same school, Rob and Robin Worthland, who were parents of a second grader, 8 years old, were shocked to find that the teacher was reading the class a book about two men falling in love, marrying, and kissing at the end. The Parkers and the Worthlands filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the school. I was there in the room when the judge ruled that because of the laws that have been passed, the school had an obligation to teach about homosexuality to children, and the parents had no right to opt out their children or even be notified. That was a judge's ruling, and it gets worse. One mother that we've been working with discovered that the school her son went to had secretly referred her teenage son to an outside homosexual club where he was encouraged to experiment with homosexual sex. The school refused to talk to her about it, and she was very distraught. She's had to file a bill in the state legislature to try to get that outrageous practice by schools stopped. A major stop on the train was forcing gay marriage on the people. In Massachusetts, as well as in California, and recently New Jersey, the people didn't have a choice. The courts simply imposed it, even after the people of California voted against it. After all, they said, if homosexuality is legal and equal, then what logical reason is there to deny same-sex marriage? That was the court's logic. Gay marriage has had many disturbing side effects. I'll mention just one. We're working with a Christian woman, a single mother whose son is in the 5th grade. The teacher is a lesbian who constantly tells the class about her wife. This has traumatized the boy terribly because it's against the family's beliefs. I went with the mother to meet with the school principal to talk about it. The principal told us that because gay marriage is legal, that the mother doesn't have a choice in that matter. And then there's the call for public funding to solve problems caused by homosexual behavior. The state and federal government are being asked in Massachusetts to spend enormous amounts of money on HIV and AIDS and other diseases associated with homosexual behavior. Gay-on-gay violence has become so epidemic that there's now considerable money allocated in the Massachusetts state budget to deal with it. You will hear a lot of talk about violence against gays. What they don't tell you is that it's overwhelmingly from other gays. If you think it can't get worse, think again. The next goal for the gay movement was imposing the acceptance of transgenderism through non-discrimination laws on that behavior. Earlier this year, the Massachusetts Department of Education published a document telling all public schools that they must allow boys to come to school in dresses and be called by girls' names if they desire that. And that boys in dresses who come to school that way must be allowed to use girls' bathrooms and locker rooms and even play on girls' sports teams. Students or teachers who disagree can be punished. It's madness. What about kids who are sexually molested early on and as a result have homosexual and cross-dressing feelings? Suppose they want help and counseling to deal with those issues. The radical homosexual movement will have none of that. They're saying that kids shouldn't be allowed to get counseling or help because they say the kids are really, quote, born that way, and that homosexuality is natural and normal. So they are pushing for laws in Massachusetts and other states to make it illegal for licensed mental health professionals to give children the help they desperately need in those situations. And the politicians are giving in to the gay activists, and the courts are agreeing. This law has already passed in California and New Jersey. It's a horrible thing to do to helpless kids, but it's part of the radical political agenda that started with legalizing the behavior. But what's particularly chilling is what happens to free speech when all this is imposed. At first, we were free to talk about what we think. After a while, anyone who publicly or even privately disagrees with these things can now expect to be relentlessly labeled as a hater, a bigot, and other disgusting things I won't mention here. Just Google me if you don't believe it. Churches are no longer free to speak out or even hold events that discuss these issues. A church in downtown Boston had a religious meeting about helping people leave homosexuality. They needed riot police to protect them from the loud, profane mob of gay activists outside the church that stormed the church and even placed a coffin at the door to terrify them further. You can see photos of that on our website. A Catholic church had a sign outside that supported traditional marriage. There were immediate threats to burn the church down, and gay activists demonstrated outside their Sunday Mass, accusing them of hate. We have pictures of that too. Finally, a meeting like this here in a public park is no longer possible in Boston if the speeches are about homosexual issues. In 2012, there was a similar gathering to this in the Boston Common, the major park in town. Waves of angry, screaming homosexual activists overran that event. The police simply stood by and watched. We have that video on our website. Unfortunately, the government now supports the gay movement. There were a few signs here tonight. That was just the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. The repeal of the Buggery Law is being sold to you in a very slick and dishonest way. They say it's about freedom and tolerance and anti-violence, even though the overwhelming violence comes from gays themselves in privacy. That's what we were told too, but it's ultimately about tyranny and an increase of diseases and the loss of your freedoms. I hope that you in Jamaica can use our experiences to your advantage. As Martin Luther King said in his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, a law that doesn't square with God's law is no law at all. Thank you very much. I want to add that this book, What Same-Sex Marriage Has Done to Massachusetts, over 50,000 copies have been given out across the United States, and you can get it on our website. I'd say it's very valuable reading. Thank you.
I want to thank Brian for coming all the way from Boston to tell us, I'm a Trinidadian, we say in Trinidad that you can't, let me say what they say in Jamaica first. They say you must take sleep and mark death. That's all. Take sleep and mark death. And in Trinidad we say you don't take candle in the night to see what you could see in the day. And I know in Jamaica they also say if fish come from river bottom and say shark down there. We in the coalition, our mandate is to speak the truth. To speak the truth. If anyone could say that what we say or what the people who we ask to address you, what they say is untrue, say it. But we think that we must have a discussion in this country, a truthful discussion of the implication of these things, so that when the decision is made, no one can say, we didn't know this would happen. The government would not be able to say so. The church would not be able to say so. No one would be able to say so. Why? Because we are in Emancipation Park. And we are speaking the truth under the stars before this country. It's being broadcast over the air. So we in the coalition, our hands will not have the blood of the generations of children who may be living in a country where there is no freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and one has to bow and kowtow to a sexual rights agenda. You have been warned. Isn't that so? Has Jamaica been warned? Have you heard? Well, as I think Moses said to the children of Israel, you are witnesses against yourself that you have heard.